Hey, all right, everyone. Welcome back to the lookout. Um, Firefighters say Dirty August. You don't say August, you say Dirty August. So, welcome to Dirty August on the lookout. We got some good stuff for you guys today. We're going to catch you up real quick on the latest developments on the fires, and then we're going to talk about prescribed fire, and we're going to tell some feel-good stuff, because it can't all be gloom and doom and death and destruction. So glad you're here. Lookout's all about storytelling, and we got some good stories. So just a couple things up here, and then we'll jump in. If you're just joining us for the first time, my name is Zeke Lunder. This is the Lookout live stream. We come to you from Chico, California, to bring you information and context on wildland fire, forestry, rural culture, such as it is. And we're user supported, and we're kind of seasonally crazy. I'm going to work every day in the summer, and then if you don't see me in the winter, it's because I got to take off time to think, tend my mind. Anyway, we're going to show you some magic pictures here, and let's get started. This is our fire, the park fire, as seen from space, and we're seeing some colors in the infrared today that we haven't seen for a few days. These bright yellows and oranges, they're telling us that the fire's kicking butt right now on in Deer Creek and Mill Creek Canyon, mainly Deer Creek, and we figured that out with the help of some of the highest technology. So let's jump over here and look at that stuff. So real quick, just to kind of revisit our fire, our big fire. We've got not a lot of action on the fire, except in the places we've been talking about the last couple of days. Antelope Creek, Mill Creek, and Deer Creek. Everywhere else, this is kind of all cold, from Chico up to Dairyville. There's a little bit of lingering heat in the last 24 hours or so out at the mouth of Antelope Creek and Dye Creek. A little bit of heat, but it's pretty cold, like not picking up much heat at all on this whole north end of the fire, which is good news. And even down here in this tricky stuff we've been talking about here in Antelope Creek on the north side of the fire, looks like they're making some serious progress here in the forks of Antelope Creek. And so you can see our our big growth here in something squeaking in here. Don't know what it is. Deer and Mill. So we'll turn off the big picture view here, and no new heat showing either on Highway 32, coming up from Chico up through Forest Ranch up to about Lomo. And let me turn off a couple things here. We don't need to drop points. So that bright red and yellow we're seeing, the infrared, that's here burning up out of Deer Creek onto the Deer and Mill Creek Plateau. And so for your geography here, here's Mill Creek Canyon, here's Deer Creek Canyon going up Highway 32, and then if we zoom out a little, you'll see Almanor up here, Lassen over here, Lassen Peak. All this black out here is Dozer Lines from the Dixie Fire. Whoa. Wrong thing. I restarted my computer today, and so we're gonna have some chaos for you. Restarted my computer and lost a couple hours worth of work. That's how it goes. See if I can open my magic. There we go, magic mouse. So Deer Creek's active. So what we have here is we're showing heat since this morning, basically. white line is where the fire was this morning, and red is where it is now. And so if you know Deer Creek, when you go up Highway 32, you drop in, there's the K-line turnoff that goes down the K-line road to the Kline Bridge, and then it drops down to the Red Bridge, and that's where the Deer Creek Trail starts and goes down to the Deer Creek Lower Falls. So looks like what's happened here is the fire, let's look at it from kind of from the north. The fire, they've been firing up here along Highway 32. The fire backed down kind of around where the K-line switchbacks down to Deer Creek, and it got established in the bottom of Deer Creek in this area that burned in 2013 in the Panther Fire. And we kind of looked at that the other day and looked at the fuels in there. You know, a lot of it was salvage logs, but a lot of it down in the steeper, deeper wasn't, and so you have a lot of dead and down logs and brush, and it's kind of an impossible place to stop a fire on foot, and even really with like heavy helicopters. So fires run up out of there today, and it's up into these like 10-year-old plantations that were reforested after that fire. So this is a lot of grass, not a lot of fuel at all. It's really kind of cleaned up. You can see the difference here between private timberland and Forest Service land, and that the private timberland got super duper cleaned over. Basically just let's see if we look at our historic imagery here. If we go back here to say, we'll see if it loads up for us. Sometimes it takes a minute. All right, well, so much for that. All right, so this yellow here is owned by Sierra Pacific Industries, and this land here is not. This is owned by the Forest Service, and they've got different priorities and philosophies and everything else. So SPI came in after the fire, and they cut down all the dead trees, and they sprayed all the brush, and they planted a bunch of new trees. And the Forest Service didn't do anything at all. And so the Forest Service land here is covered with snags and down logs and heavy brush, and Sierra Pacific land is not. And so likely the fire is going to be a lot more controllable here when it hits the rim. The problem is this was happening at 2 p.m. and the fire is kind of kicking butt, so likely this is all on fire now here too. So we'll see what happens there. It's kind of flat. Remember that a lot of this burned. Let's see where the fire scar is from 2013. So this edge here is where the fire stopped in 2013. So you can see that outside is stuff that hasn't burned. So I'm thinking it's really likely that the fire, because it ran out of here at 2 in the afternoon with a headward run, it's likely established out in here, but I don't have any proof of that yet. But if it is, it's not going to be as easy to put out. It's going to take away the advantage we had of the fire hitting this salvaged land. Over here in Dead Horse Creek, and there's 2 Dead Horse Creeks, one in Antelope Creek and one here in Deer Creek. Fire kind of ran the slope, and it spotted out into these clear cuts also. So it'll be interesting in the morning to see how far this got and if it kind of slopped over into Mill Creek. The fire hasn't run a lot upstream, but it has run towards Kline Bridge, and here's the Kline Bridge here. So this fire is what we call flanking, and we have up canyon winds in the afternoon, and so it's not unlikely that it's also going to run up here through, like here's the edge of the Panther Fire, and here hasn't burned for longer. So it's not unlikely it's going to burn through here. And what we talked about the other day is that there's a ton of dead fir trees out in this landscape. Private land has done a little better job of cutting down and like salvage logging these trees as they've died, but got to remember that a lot of this tree death has coincided with the Dixie Fire and the Bear Fire and other fires that have loaded the log markets with huge amounts of extra wood. So the private timber landowners haven't had to cut a lot of their green forests or even stuff that they would like to salvage because they've had so much wood to work through from Dixie fires and other large fires loading the market with wood. So not unlikely that this fire is going to move into here and go up in Cement Creek. It's tough ground to fight fire. We'll see how this fares, this land here fares. And is this SPI? This is Sierra Pacific Industries. Okay. This is Collins here, so I gotta adjust my, let me adjust my layers here a little. Like I said, I lost a bunch of stuff that, There we go. Okay, green here is actually Collins pine, so it's a mix. And I think that something I seem to remember happening was Sierra Pacific started the fire that burned down here onto Collins back in 2013 because their burn pile got away. And I think what happened is that SPI basically ended up having to give Collins a bunch of land because that's the way it works. If you burn up someone else's land, you gotta give them your land, or you gotta give them a lot of money. And SPI has a lot of land, so I think that they were more keen to give them land than give them money. Horse trading. Anyway, yeah. So you see, it's a mix down in here of SPI and Collins. One thing that was interesting during the Panther Fire was a friend of mine was a forester for Collins at the time, and he was standing down here watching this fire, the Panther Fire, blow the wind in last day of April, early May. And he said that he'd done a lot of thinning in here as a forester for Collins, and he watched the fire just blast through well-thinned stuff that we all would have expected to be a fuel break. And it kind of goes to show that, like, there's a lot that we don't know about how forestry and fires interact. There's a lot of things we thought we knew about how much you needed to thin to take a forest fire that was going to crown up and kill trees versus and make it so it was a surface fire. So I'd say, like, always learning. Everyone's always learning in this game because fire's always changing, weather's changing, fuels change. There's a lot to learn. So anyway, what we see though is fire blasted up here out of Forest Service ownership and here out of SPI ownership, and it's headed up the hill. And so we'll have to see, you know, the influence of this 2013 fire, and then also if the fire, how the fire behaves here in this stuff that's got the heavy beetle kill. I'm hoping tomorrow that I can get up to Windy Cut. You know, I've been taking pictures there forever of the forest conditions, and I'd like to take pictures of it burning and actually see what's happening. We'll see if I can get in there. So if I'm not on the live stream tomorrow, it's because I'm out in the field getting smarter for y'all. Anyway, another thing was interesting, and when I did a watershed report here, and one of our big recommendations in 1999 when I wrote the fire plan for Deer Creek Watershed Conservancy was that they should be thinning, that this was a high-risk place and that they should be really focused on thinning these sections up here. And really what's happened since the 90s or early 2000s is that back in the day, we had a biomass power plant in Westwood. Let's just look at this. There's this cool site, Google Earth Engine, and if you go zoom in on anywhere, basically, you can animate back to 1984. And so if we look here at look at this landscape here in 1984. Well, there's a lot that goes on here, right? So if we look at what the landscape looked on 1984, we talked about how SPI is kind of worked through a kind of a 30-year plan for clear cutting and working through rotations here. And that's all really easy to see. You see, like, okay, it went from being a forest in 1984 that was being picked and plucked to a forest that got a lot of clear cuts. But what I think is more interesting than that is what you see in this imagery is some other things going on. Like, check out how it changes between like 1986, where it's all kind of thickets, and say 1990. This isn't a clear cut, this is a thinning. And this is thinning, right? So all this land in Upper Chico Creek in 1995, 96, like, they thinned the heck out of this. Everything that you could drive a Feller buncher on, which is a mechanical thinning like machine, got thinned during that time period. And that was because there was a biomass power plant in Westwood over here that was burning wood chips, ultra power. And there was a subsidy for thinning. Like, if you made energy from wood chips, that energy was subsidized. So you can see all around Westwood, like, the woods really changed during that time. Mechanical harvesting got invented, and the woods got thinned. You can just see, like, the color gets lighter, and that's because, like, some places half the trees got removed. So you see it, like, just, and then you end up with Dixie fire, but just watch that get paler and paler, right? That's because we had a biomass plant, and the biomass plant had a big appetite for wood, and basically we were able to thin tens of thousands of acres. And so in the front country, like, that was impactful, and that has kind of shaped the character of the woods today. One of the things that means is that a lot of this area came back in super dense, because we let all sorts of light into the forest. But I just want to show that basically what we found in 1999 when when I was doing the watershed plan was there was all this thinning here, like on the rim above Mill Creek. Collins Pine, not only could they sell chips to ultra power, but they had a power plant at their mill, and they still do. And they could make electricity to run their mill, and they could also sell the excess energy. So what we recommended in 1999 was Collins Pine had thinned the snot out of this whole Mill Creek plateau. And that created opportunities to put prescribed fire into Mill Creek Canyon, because we could have burned at that time in Mill Creek Canyon, and there wouldn't have been a threat to Collins Pine, because this was all, like, you could walk through, you could ride through this on a quad going 30 miles an hour and not hit a tree, So that didn't happen. Collins was afraid of fire. This was before the big liability issues around prescribed fire that came later, but it just wasn't in their program. They didn't see an incentive, and they said, well, we don't really care if there's these kind of Christmas tree thickets out here, because we have a power plant. We can burn the biomass. Biomass is a resource for us. It's not really a liability. This was before we were having mega fires. So I just wanted to show that this is possible if we had a biomass industry in Westwood or in Chester or other places. We'd have a market to do landscape scale mechanical thinning on hundreds of thousands of acres that are flat enough to run machinery on. And that would open the door for us to put prescribed fire into this landscape at scale, and it would give us a place to get rid of all this woody biomass that we have. Instead, we're burning it all up. So if we take this out, to the end, we've got, like, this entire landscape is been clear cut now because all the trees are gone, because they burned in the Dixie fire. So one of the lessons for me too is just that when you look at how much thinning got done in the Almanor Basin in the 90s, that was an ephemeral benefit. We thought that because we thinned it so heavily, that it would be fire safe for a long time. And so, like, yeah, maybe if we'd had the Dixie fire in 1999, it would have been thinned enough. But in that kind of 20-year period between the time that we stopped thinning so much and the time the Dixie fire happened, that thinning let a ton of light in the forest, and tons of little baby trees grew up, and we ended up having these super thick young trees everywhere, and that went away. So it's not like you can just thin the forest and then you don't have to do anything. Biomass plant went away because the subsidy ended. So without the kind of per kilowatt subsidy that the operator was getting paid to put that energy into the grid as kind of renewable energy, it doesn't pencil. So biomass energy really doesn't pencil right now without subsidies. So the politics around biomass are really jacked too. So we'll come back to that, but I just wanted to share that as kind of an aside as to some of the landscape history here and how much this landscape has changed across this time period. So you can see the fires happen, and you can see a lot of stuff. So anyway, this Google Earth engine, it's pretty awesome, and I'll put a link in here. So someone asked about why the biomass plant go away, and or what's going on now with biomass, and yikes. One of the things that's happening with biomass in general is that there's places in the southeast and Georgia and other places where they grow pine, where they're just growing biomass. They're just growing trees just to pelletize them and send them to Europe, because Europe, they've got fossil fuel standards, so they want to burn biomass in their coal plants so they can say they're not burning fossil fuels. And so people are saying, well, hey, this is bad news to just grow a forest to burn it, and they're saying that the carbon emissions from biomass are worse than the carbon emissions for burning coal. And so they're using that to hijack the whole global biomass conversation, and they're kind of not acknowledging that there's places where we have too much biomass, like the western U.S., where if we don't find a way to get rid of it, we're not going to have any forests anymore. So I think that's the problem when you try to come up with like a global soundbite or a global perspective on a very complicated issue that changes wherever you go. Anyway, that's just some history and maybe more information than you wanted. You just wanted to see what's going on with the fire. But it all kind of ends out reflected in the forest conditions, right? So a lot of the stuff up here that got thinned super heavily 30 years ago now is super thick because of that past management action. So we recommended thinning back in the day, and it was more feasible to propose large-scale thinning back then because there was a market for chips. And at least what that would do is there was enough of a market for chips that it could pay the way out of the woods. So it could pay to cut the material, haul to a landing, ship it onto the landing, put it in trucks. So it's an energy-intensive proposition to move things out of the woods to a mill. It takes a lot of energy. But at least that would pay for itself back in the day. So fire's headed for Onion Summit. Ryan's been saying fire wants to eat some onion soup. One other thing to say about biomass is that kind of the Center for Biological Diversity and other enviros, their solution to kind of throttle biomass development in California was to push for a really small size plant. So they kind of got the California Energy Commission to cap the plants that they were kind of proposing to build at 3 megawatts. And the problem with 3 megawatts is like you could almost feed it with like a wheelbarrow. And the big plants we had in the past were like, 30 megawatts or 60 megawatts. And then, but basically for loggers to be able to, for us to industrialize and get to a scale that will support viable kind of contractors, we're not going to get that with a small plant that you can feed with like pickup trucks or, even a couple chip trucks a day. Like, because when it comes down to it, if you want a logger who's already in the business to get into the biomass business, they need to buy chip trucks, and they need to buy a giant grinder, and they need to buy a skidder, and they need to buy a feller buncher if they don't already have one. And so you're talking about an outlay of several $1 million for someone to start like what they'd call a biomass side, which is the equipment that you need to like keep a crew busy and function at an economical scale. So these small plants, they make people feel good, and there's like lots of talk about, hey, we're gonna have a biomass plant in, you know, Camptonville or Crescent Mills or whatever else, but they're not, because of the kind of political wrangling, no one's really proposing plants at a scale that will make an economical sense for operators to get into business or really make a significant dent in our forest fuels problems. I mean, it's great if you can use the biomass to heat a hospital or heat a school or a, you know, but it's to really like make it happen, we have to do it at an industrial scale. And environmental groups are afraid that once you build a plant that works at industrial scale, you got to feed it for 30 years, which is true because it's a 30-year investment to build something like this. But I say, well, is that a bad thing? Like, if we don't do that, are we going to have any forest left? And so a lot of argument about whether or not thinning works, but in my opinion, thinning is a gateway to us to be able to put prescribed fire on the ground at a large enough scale that we might save some of these forests. So that's what we got today. Just fire. Things are looking great here as far as new heat, but we're starting hotter and drier weather. It looked like there's a decent sized spot fire here today in the South Fork of Antelope Creek. There's hardly any spread today at all, kind of from the stuff that we were worried about all the way across. But there's some growth here in the South Fork, and there's some growth. There's, you know, this is the little former ranger station called Yellow Jacket. It's a landmark. Fire's established, a good sized spot fire there. And then we kind of have the kind of wild card of how this fire that's moving out of Mill Creek might or might not advance into the timber. Right now it didn't grow a lot, and there's this big fuel break along the top. It's kind of a question of if we get big runs up out of here. This is not a done deal, but good progress, and they've made for sure the most of the windows they had of opportunity with the weather. So the other kind of big open question for me right now is the fire going to cross Mill Creek and run up this side and kind of join with this fire? Will they influence each other? And then once this fire is established here in Panther Creek, can it roll back out here below Windy Cut? And we're looking kind of back towards Butte Meadows. And is there a way that this fire might actually make an end run up out of Deer Creek and blow back towards Butte Meadows this way? So it's by no means done deal, and it's rugged spot. We got some new fire line data somewhere in here. Showing basically they got proposed Dozer Line up this ridge, but it may be a moot point if the fire burns from both sides. They've prepped this road. They've got Dozer Line kind of coming up what's called the L line, which goes all the way back up to Deer Creek Meadows at the top of 32. They've got Dozer Line punched down this ridge and hand line down to the Red Bridge. So they basically built a box here around the Panther Creek watershed. And the next logical thing to do, depending on how this goes, would be for them to fire this. The conditions aren't great for them to fire it with the hot weather and winds, but they do have kind of down canyon winds going for them here. And then we've got the north of that, we've got the Cub and Onion fire that burned in 2008. They're also showing Dozer Line here, double Dozer Line, both down the ridge of Colby Mountain and down Colby Creek and through Colby Meadow, up here by Butte Meadows. So if you go from Butte Meadows up to Jonesville, and I apologize for not keeping north up for you guys all the time, but basically they've got a box around it on the side that's contained here on Highway 32 that's been fired. And that's kind of contingency in case it does get around on them and come back up across 32 between Deer Creek and the top of the grade one other thing to talk about, as far as kind of landscape history, is this portion of Deer Creek. So if we're just to kind of orient ourselves, once you drop in from, on Highway 32, you drop in and there's the K line, and then you go down past Windy Cut like you're going down to the Red Bridge and the Deer Creek Trail. There's this watershed here that's Calf Creek, and this watershed got heavily logged in the 80s, and then nothing's really been done in there for 40 years, and really bad fuels. Another case where they used helicopters in here and logged all the biggest trees out, and when you cut down a tree that's got no branches for the first 60 feet, then when you get to the branches, they're like like 2 or 3 feet. They're enormous. Old growth branches on sugar pine and pine are really big, and so when you helicopter log, you chop all that stuff off and leave it on the ground and pull the logs out because the branches aren't worth anything. So they did that in the 80s. They helicopter logged in here and left crazy amounts of slash, and they were supposed to, and then some places they cable logged. Actually, I take it back. They cable logged almost all of this, but the same thing. You cut off all the branches, leave all the slash, and then they're supposed to come back and like deal with the slash. And the land was so beat up after the cable logging that the hydrologists and soil scientists were like, no, just leave it. Don't go do anything in there, because they're worried about sediment. So what happened there is the same thing that's happened in these areas that are thinned. Trees grew back like crazy through these thickets of head-high, giant old growth slash, and so this watershed has got some real fuels issues, and so if it takes fire from the bottom, it could be really bad. Best case scenario here would be to have fire in this that came down from the top, but that's not the way this is set up. So I'm hoping that over the next week or so we don't have this fire that's established here somehow get back across here and burn up out of here, because if it does, it could be really pretty severe in this Calf Creek watershed. Anyway, that's your landscape history, Deer Creek data dump. Now I want to talk about something that I think is a lot more fun and exciting and hopeful. Let's turn off all this blood red craziness. There's the fire, people. There's the fire. All right, so coming down to Cohasset. I want to play some videos here. This is a year ago in the spring. And this is a property called Ron Ward's. This is called, we're not going to argue about global warming in the comments, people. We got some local warming right here. So this is Maple Creek Ranch. Maple Creek Ranch is in Cohasset. It's this guy that we know named Ron Ward who lives up there, who's married into the family. And Maple Creek Ranch is 500 acres on Cohasset Ridge. And Ron has offered up Maple Creek Ranch in the last few years as kind of a sandbox for people that want to play with prescribed fire. And he's done a ton of thinning to prep the land. And then when the Butte Prescribed Burn Association got started up, Ron was one of the early people that said, "Hey, I want to do that. Why don't you guys come burn on my land?" And so my friend Wolfie Rugel out here, she wrote some grants and funded the Prescribed Burn Association. And basically, it's kind of a cooperative where if you want to burn your land, you can come burn other people's land, and then they'll come help you. The railroad track here is the Maple Creek Ranch. They have this really cool, like, super narrow gauge, like, toy railroad that's got, like, I think a mile of track or something. And they had this the guy, kind of the patriarch, he built this cool railroad, and kids would come up and ride around on it. And so it's got sidings and turnarounds and a station, and it goes all over the property. And it also makes kind of a cool unit boundary when we burn up there. And so what the PBA has done is it's kind of it's provided a venue where people can get training. So almost everyone here has very little previous fire experience, and then there's some folks here in the cool-looking outfits from Spain. The Spaniards have the sweetest gear. The Europeans have like cool helmets, stylish like zippers and pockets everywhere. And so what we do is we run these events basically using an incident command system. Fire kind of your standard fire command structure. So we'll have a firing boss and a burn boss and a holding boss, and we'll have squad bosses. And so there's a chance for people to learn how to operate in this kind of organized environment. It's a way for us to kind of bring some order to the chaos that happens when you have a bunch of people who haven't worked together. And people are asking like, well, I've got no experience, what can I do? And it's like, well, there's a lot of skills that are necessary to prep a burn. There's raking and there's leaf blowing, and it's like, if you can show up with your leaf blower, we'll put you to work. And so company I work for, Deer Creek, we've gotten some funding through the Resource Conservation District to provide technical assistance. So I've come out and run the burns and worked as a firing boss and worked as a trainer. And one of the great opportunities for this is like, I haven't come up through a traditional wildfire operations background. And so it's been hard for me, even though I've been burning for 30 years, to get qualified as a burn boss. But through these PBA burns, I can come out and work as a burn boss without the qualifications as a trainee. And then I was able to build up the experience I needed to show on paper to be signed off under the state burn boss program. And this is a Resource Conservation District employee. Both of these gals work for the Resource Conservation District. And so we get a chance really to, learn, but also just experiment. Hey, what if I light it like this? What if you put fire at the bottom of the plant? What if you put it on the top of the plant? What if you light dots? So the RCD's gotten really involved, and a lot of the Fire Safe Council and a lot of just private citizens. This is Claire Monahan. She works at the CSU Reserves, and when I first met her, she had never burned anything, and now she's burned, all over the place and highly competent. So it's great to see kids that coming just out of like San Jose or something where they've never really had any exposure to fire, and now they're competent. And like, if I see Claire or any of the gals from BSER show up on my burn with an engine, like, I'm happy. I know that I've got competent people, and that I don't have to worry about whatever assignment I give them. Here, one of my employees is getting instruction from Claire on firing patterns. And this guy, he grew up in Paradise, and he graduated from high school the year of the campfire, and he and his family drove out through the flames and were stuck in traffic. And so he got a computer science degree and decided he wanted to get into fire resilience. And so he's been working for us, and this is a chance for me to get someone like him out and put a torch in their hand and get them just some experience with good fire. And this is our kind of our fearless leader. One of our real gift here is Dan Kelleher. Kelleher is a burn boss. He's always volunteering. And so he built a relationship with Ron Ward. And earlier this year, Ron called Dan and said, hey, I want to put in a sprinkler system at my house. I think I'm losing my insurance. And we've done all this burning, and I think that I could stay here and defend my house if there's a fire. And Dan teaches pumps and hose water handling equipment classes, and he's a wizard with the math of friction loss and other things. And he was a urban firefighter before he was a wildland guy. So he came up and he looked at what Ron had laid out, and he said, well, that's not going to work. And they laid out a 4-inch pipe about 200 yards up a hill from a giant pond, and they put a big gas-powered fire pump on it. And so during the fire, they finished this thing like 3 hours before the fire got there, because they were already working on it. But here came the fire, and they still had some fittings and fiddling. So they were putting 300 gallons a minute out onto the landscape around Ron's house. And the area right below Ron's house is that time-lapse area I showed right at the beginning, where we burned the slope that was covered with kind of slash and stuff. So I was talking to Dan yesterday, and Dan said, and here's where we're talking about in Cohasset. So all this stuff in red is stuff that has been burned in the last 2 or 3 years by the PBA. And then this is a unit that we burned this last fall, that I showed the video from, most of the video you just saw. And so what happened here was the fire came up out of, let's see if I get it. It came up out of the bottom here. Let's see if I can find my kind of initial perimeters. Second day of the fire came blasting up out of Mud Creek here, and it ran into all this stuff that Ron's been thinning. This is Maple Creek Ranch, 500 acres. And Dan Kelleher was here on Ron's deck getting soaked by the fire hoses and everything, by all the sprinklers. And he said the fire came boiling up out of here, and when it got to here, the flames were like 150 feet over his head, looking down into the canyon. And then he ducked around the back of the house because it was too hot. And by the time he came back around the house, the fire had laid down, and it hit their wet sprinkler area, and that was it. It took the heat out of that run. And why that's important to the story is here's satellite imagery taken about 5 days ago, and the blue areas are areas where trees have survived in Cohasset. And so Cohasset got hit really hard in the lower ridge. Everywhere that's brown here, the trees are all dead, and the fire was severe. But Upper Cohasset has this kind of like little window of survivorship, and I can't really tell, but it seems, talking to Dan and other folks, like this work we did here right at the edge of the canyon, which is, this place was chosen for a reason to do all this work. That may be the reason that a lot of this ridge is still standing. So, like I said before, it's not necessarily about burning the entire landscape. It's about burning the right places and figuring out strategically what we can do. Now, one of the kind of sadder stories out of all this is that a lot of this land was masticated by the Fire Safe Council, and mastication is where you grind up the forest, basically. And I don't know if I have any pictures here of it, but this is what a lot of it looked like before it was masticated. And this is what a lot of that ridge looked like before it was thinned and burned. So the mastication, it kept this fire from being a crown fire, but what happened is all the trees out here in the area that were masticated, they died. And so mastication's tough because you aren't reducing fuel, you're just rearranging it. So in places that they thinned out here and hauled the trees, hauled the logs away, a lot of that survived. But in the places where it was just masticated, it may not have carried a crown fire, but it killed all the remnant trees, and that's too bad because there was a nice future forest here. And I'd actually written, we had a whole plan here, so a lot of this inside stuff here got roasted. But if you look at all these houses over here, that's a lot of what survived. So I'm just sharing this because PBA is great, and it's hopeful, and it's something we can do collectively to kind of take action. And it's the model, really, of we got to scale up. And we got to build the license. The more people that live up here that learn to burn, the more likely they're going to be accepting of it. The folks that are scared still prescribe fire are generally the folks that have not come out and done it. So what else is there to show on that? We got we'll talk a lot. We've got some good videos on our YouTube about working inside a prescribed fire. And so if you want to learn more, like we've got a whole playlist on our YouTube of prescribed fire, and I'll make sure it's updated. One of these that I like the best and I recommend you check out is oh, that's Claire Monahan. We interviewed Claire, but we did another one that we walked around inside a burn that was happening in Chico Creek, and we talked about like the strategy, how burning gets done, how we sequence it, how we monitor it. And when you're supporting a lookout, basically you're paying for me to go out and do this stuff. I haven't had necessarily funding to do a lot of this video I've done. I've just shot it knowing that it was going to be useful for the lookout. But where else are you going to get a chance to go hang out inside a prescribed burn? We define kind of some of the terms. What we're doing here is lighting these strips, and the idea is that the fire, as soon as it starts to get up kind of a head of steam, it hits the previous strip. Now, sadly, I think that this whole stand that we burned here got fried in the fire because it was still too thick. Even though we reduced all these surface fuels, the fire got into here as a crown fire, and I think that this pine stand is likely a goner. So it definitely adds that sense of urgency to what we're doing to, you know, maybe we can make a difference. Yeah, and this guy says for years now we've burned up all the pine needles. Now we gotta deal with the rest of the stuff. And I'd say I don't know what's going on there. Oh, that was the smoke from our prescribed fire. Yeah, and back to what we talked about is just that we're gonna have to burn hotter. We can't do burns that just stay on the ground and burn the pine needles. We've got to actually do burns that are hot enough to be impactful and reduce the number of trees out there. And that's going to require an adjustment, because right now if you do a burn and you kill a bunch of trees, people come by and they see all these red trees and they're like, oh, that looks terrible. They, like, the Forest Service totally blew it. And it's like, well, maybe that's the goal, that you're actually trying to kill trees. Because look at behind me, we've got like way too many trees in that forest. Even if we could take out 2/3 of those trees and we still have too many trees. Anyway, check out those things, and let's check back real quick on our fire here. Bald Mountain. And they're gonna give us epilepsy here. Sorry. I want a job running a webcam. They're never pointing where I want them. That's what it looked like earlier today. This is the Stover Mountain webcam. So this was looking down into Deer Creek today, and this is kind of what the run out of Deer Creek was looking like. But kind of coming back to what people have been worried about with like the Dixie Fire getting into Chester, I'd say, like, take a look at this, like, Butte Lake camera. If you go back and look in the middle of the day. Sorry. Like this landscape out here, the Dixie burned through and underburned. Like, it's not looking super flammable. And even down here, a lot of what burned during Dixie, like we said before, it's like super cleaned up. So if you're in Chester, worried about the fire burning through the Dixie Fire, I still want to tell you that I feel like probably not gonna take you out. Sorry, I keep jumping around here. Like, this is Stover Mountain. This is between where this fire could end up and Chester, and so much of the land around Chester looks like this. So I know the smoke sucks and the towering column overhead is super scary, but there you go. Yeah, and then this guy over here, Wildland Firefighter, saying smoke management is another issue. And I think it's great timing to talk about that because obviously if you're living in Westwood right now, Chester, Lake Almanor, smoke management is an issue. Yeah, if you're in Mineral, if you're in Westwood, Chester, like, the air's not good. So, one way or another, we're going to have smoke. And we can live with, like, months of smoke in the summer. Prescribed fire is not going to do away with all wildfires, but there's no fire-free future. You know, you're going to have to live with some smoke one way or another. And we can manage prescribed fire smoke to an extent. But smoke's part of living up there in the hillbilly sticks. No update on Mineral. Anyway, I think I'll end up with I'm gonna cut it off before I think of anything else. I just want right, yeah, right. Here's the forecast for tomorrow. Widespread lightning. That's what we need. And then on Saturday, extra widespread lightning. How about Sunday? Sunday's just going to be dry. Monday, windy. All right, folks, this is why they call it Dirty August. So hopefully, if you're in the Lookout viewing area, you're stoked because if you live in Cohasset, it's not going to burn again. If you live in Chester, it's not going to burn again. If you live in Westwood, it's not going to burn again. So that is the one benefit of living in a landscape that's all burned up, is like you don't have to worry about lightning if you're living in Westwood right now. You don't have to worry about it if you're living in Greenville. So let's enjoy that at least. We don't have enough fuel on the ground right now to burn up Greenville. But on that tip, if we get a bunch of lightning strikes all over the Plumas National Forest, and I see the Plumas National Forest on Facebook saying, hey, we're putting out all the lightning fires in a Dixie fire, I'm going to say, why the hell are you doing it? Like, there's nothing to burn. And so, are we going to take firefighters and, like, drop them in to put out a single snag that's surrounded with a landscape that like, literally, I shit you not. Right now, the Lassen National Forest, if there's a lightning strike out here that hits this tree, they're gonna send people out there to cut that tree down and put it out. Like, that's going on, people. And that is freaking ridiculous. And so if you see the Forest Service say, like, we put out all the lightning strikes in the Dixie Fire, why don't you ask them why did you do that? Like, do you want us to say thank you for saving us from the fire that was going to burn one tree? For, like, they'll send in repellers. Some poor guy's, like, I mean, he's having fun, but he's going to rappel out of a freaking helicopter into some snag patch to cut down a tree that's on fire and put it out so it doesn't burn that tree. It's ridiculous. And so the Forest Service, they're just, like, politically, they're in this terrible situation where they think that the public wants to put out every fire. So every time that you get on there and thank them for putting out a fire in a place like this, you're just kind of perpetuating that. So please don't tell the Forest Service that they're heroes when they go and they put out a fire that's burning a single snag in the middle of a million-acre burn scar. Like, if we can't let fires burn in this landscape, like, there's no hope of us ever getting ahead of this. Anyway, so there you go. Widespread lightning, high risk, flammable fuels, resource drawdown, etc. I just want to look real quick. One thing that happened today while we were doing other things was our favorite satellite went over. and I haven't had time to look for it yet, but my favorite satellite comes over every 5 days, and here we go. It came over and captured our fire, and it's smoky, but we'll work a little magic here, and I'm gonna show you my face because I don't want to share my secret sauce. Oh man, come on people. I got to give a shout out to Paul Fuselier, who gave me the secret sauce to make super cool images where you can see through smoke and everything. It's loading up. Now that I got my secret sauce put in there, I'm not gonna give away all my tricks. Cool. So here you go. This is today at noon. Our fire burning up out of Deer Creek. And what's interesting here is this is our severity map. So you can see, like, here's the edge of the fire, and you can see that it hasn't killed all of the forest here that it's burned through in this last week of mild weather, or the last 5 days. So this is Mill Creek. This is and you can see today that the fire that's burning in Mill Creek, there's hardly any heat, just on this really fine edge of it. There's all the scattered heat, and then here this is where we're talking about coming up out of the canyon. So I think it's interesting for people to see how fire behaves. Like, you kind of picture this whole area's on fire. Here's some other really cool, this is the first time I'm seeing this, is here's Highway 32, and here's the firing operation they did, right? So they had this good window of weather to put fire on the ground, and it underburned. So you can see all this blue on Sierra Pacific Industries. It underburned. Their big trees aren't going to die. It probably killed a lot of their small trees, but that's pretty awesome if you're a SPI. That basically you just got a nice big prescribed burn. And so I think what I would say, when I'm talking about like putting fire on the ground at like the scale of thousands of acres, people say, "Oh, you can't do that without treating the forest first. We got to thin everything first." And this is the 4th week of July, following 3 of the driest weeks in the history of weather keeping, and they underburned this. They had a lot of resources. They had a lot of helicopters and crews and everything else, and it cost millions of dollars. But we underburned commercial timberland in July and didn't kill all the trees. So I think that we got to kind of redefine our idea of what is possible. And if I'm a burn boss and I can have Type 1 helicopters and air tankers at my disposal, I could get a lot of burning done we could broaden our window under which we can operate, right? So it's not like we don't have the tools to do this stuff. Like, when you trust the people in yellow shirts to go and burn in the middle of July, light an underburn and hold it with high consequences. Like, if we can do this stuff during wildfires, how are we going to invent the political will for us to be able to do this when there's not a fire burning? And say, like, hey, we had a wet winter, it's July. Yeah, I know it's July, I know it's dry, but give me some Type 1 helicopters and 3,000 firefighters, and I can burn this part here. And maybe, it's not as if these forests that right now are not fire resilient can never get that way. It's easy to look at this landscape and say, like, oh, there's no way we could ever burn in there. It's like, well, they might take some losses in their young stands, but we have options. I think there's a lot of object lessons that we get out of an episode like this, where we see, like, hey, they did a prescribed burn, did a 15,000 acre prescribed burn the 4th week of July, and it was expensive, but it didn't kill all SPI's trees. I was trying to load up something 3D here. Looks like there's some good comments over here. One of the comments is that, like, it's not guaranteed that these trees are going to survive because there was a lot of heat in there. But But like this is what the same forest looked like when it got a head fire run during the peak burning, right? Like all killed. And so this fire kind of laid down when the weather changed. They were strategic in how they put fire on the ground in here. And it'll be interesting, you know, we'll look at this over the next year and watch what we've seen. Basically, we've done a ton of this kind of imagery during the Dixie Fire, and there's some mortality that follows on, but oftentimes what you see kind of right off the bat is fairly accurate to what survives. So there you go. So let's just see if there's anything else over here in like that Cohasset Island. It's gonna be interesting to see, you know, survivorship here. That this is what we were talking about at Ron Ward's, and then out here is the Beaver Creek Pinery, and I don't see nothing green out there. And that, if that is torched, it's really terrible because that was a really cool, important place. Anyway, you saw it here first, folks. Oh, this is the Cohasset stuff here. Looks better. And just to point out with fire severity, like if we were mapping fire severity right now, like this whole landscape got severe fire, but it was grass before, and it's fine. Like it's all the stuff out here. It's like we got a 400,000 acre fire, and like 320,000 acres of it is grass and brush and oaks, and it's going to be completely fine. So don't let anyone tell you that this wildfire devastated 400,000 acres. It devastated a lot of lives, and there's no sugarcoating that. But the landscape, like this entire landscape out here, if we go back and look at it like a couple weeks ago, you'll see that it was wild land. All right, so this is kind of a visual of it, and let's just go back. Wildfire 371, he's got lots of great comments. He said they did pull it off, but it's not replicable every time in place. And that's for sure. All right, so yeah, just to kind of revisit real quick what this landscape looked like before the fire. Wildland firefighters saying that we got to worry about mudslides out here. I'd say not so much knowing the geology out here. Here's Inskip Hill. Here's Cohasset Ridge. So this is like 2 days before the fire, right? And let me see if I can load our fire perimeter in here real quick. It doesn't want me to. Alright, anyway. That'll make it easy. Try something else. Let's see if these guys will they take that. Well, they didn't like that either. Well, you just have to take my word for it that our fire kind of goes like this. Right? It kind of gets right up the edge of the timber. Jesus. So I just want to look at this landscape here when I'm talking about fire effects and kind of long-term effects. Let's just do a quick little study here, and let's just measure like the brush and grass. All right, so we got 265,000 acres. That's just brush and grass. And that's being kind of generous, right? Like Cohasset, like you could probably say that like all this down here is kind of brush. Like, I mean, even more, right? Like we'll go up, sorry, here. Like we don't really get into timber till we get to Forest Ranch, right? So let's just say that like all this is kind of brush and not really conifer at all. Even way up here into Deer Creek, right? This is brushy. There's a little timber on top of the ridge, but like most part, this is like oak, and there's just not a lot of pine trees or anything out here. Oh, there's a little timber there. All right, so we're talking 300,000 acres of this fire basically is brush. So 400, so 3/4 of this is brush. And that's like super fire adapted. Like it's going to come back as new brush, grass, oak sprouts, bay sprouts, everything, full life, right? No mudslides because there's no soil. Seriously, like you're not gonna have a lot of mudslides out here because it's grass, and there's like seriously like almost no soil. So super stable geology. So that's basically 300,000 acres of pretty good fire. It's not good if you live there, I know. It's not good if you're evacuated. It's not good if you're breathing all the smoke in Westwood. But that's, of this entire landscape, the fact that we just burned that all, like the Forest Service has been planning to burn a little bit of issue wilderness for like 5 years. And I went to a meeting and said, it's going to burn by the time you get your plan done, it's just going to burn. So like, why bother? Oh, don't say that. I don't think it's going to happen. It's like, well, you look at the fire history out here and you're like, well, why would you think that it wouldn't burn before you get your plan done? Like that's our fire history. So it's just got another layer in there, but it's fire landscape. So don't fret. I think it's kind of meaningless when people say like, oh, it's the biggest fire and like it's the 4th largest fire in California history. It's like, well, so what? Not, fire history. It's a big fire, but it's not like this land hasn't had big fires before. Like there were no firefighters in 1848 out here keeping it from burning. There were native people lighting it, but it got burned. I'm not sad about that. I'm sad about other things. Sad for my friends that lost their stuff, but let's mourn the material losses. Let's not mourn the fact that this land got fire. All right, folks. Now I'm serious. I am going to cut it off. Um, our project is we picked up some sponsorship from QTAC. QTAC is equipment manufacturer, and they make some really sweet equipment, like this little. They make these cool they make cool stuff for UTVs for prescribed burning. They're really building a lot of cool custom equipment for prescribed fire, and so QTAC's gonna be sponsoring us. We'll show stuff that they have been doing around Chico, and we'll talk with them a bit. But they're helping sponsor the show, and I appreciate it. So thanks QTAC, and thank you all for supporting us, and we'll catch you soon. We'll likely have a live stream tomorrow. Just count on us having live streams at 8 until the fire stops doing stuff. And appreciate all your support. Shipped out a whole bunch of hats and stuff today. If you want hats, jump on the lookout.org and get hats. You get cool t-shirts, everything else. And thanks for all your comments over there. And no, I don't really have time to read any of them. So if you're coming over there, you're going to get responses from other people, but I won't have a lot of time to look at them.